I forget.
Chandler, I have two
Yes.
questions for Chandler. Do you have a Rumble channel?
I don't, but I have a Rumble login. I have not posted any content on Rumble. But-
You might want to do that. I'll share the YouTube now. I'm going to do it, even though I feel dirty doing it. But and now, what is your
Chandler's
first
my
video about?
co-host for Thursday night OJ Simpson's on my channel. She's
there you go.
co-host.
Yeah, it's Thursday morning for me. I get up at 4:30. And that's because I love Jeff so much. I really enjoy our OJ streams. They're a lot of fun.
You heard it first here. Chandler's on Jeff.
Yeah, I'll put. I'll put my. Here's my Rumble.
Make a comment in the chat.
Oh, Jeff, behave.
I got a question, Chandler. What is the thesis? What is the executive summary of why you're not a feminist?
Feminism is antiquated, myopic, and disingenuous. That's my main line. And essentially, it predicates itself on the notion that women, in order to become equal to men, that the concept of equality in feminism is, it's based on this idea that men are impervious to harm, which is false. And the Duluth Model, which permeates all of domestic violence investigations, the court system, etc., it is this feminist idea, and what it does is it's incredibly destructive. It puts men at harm. Studies have shown that men and women perpetuate domestic violence equally. And so essentially, my liberal college brainwashing about how feminism was so important because the patriarchy is destroying society, I over time came to the conclusion, looking at research, looking at statistics, that men and women are being harmed equally, and we need to stop looking at things through this lens that women are these fragile creatures. Women can cause harm just as easily. And so I'm not a feminist because feminists think that men have everything, and that's not true.
Have you seen The Red Pill by chance? Cassie J's movie?
I haven't. But I have been theoretically red-pilled through.
No, I'd really recommend it because that's kind of the premise of her movie. I think it's 2016 now. It's several years old. But she was going to make a movie, essentially a feminist movie, blah, 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 blah. She went out and met with the men's rights activists, including Karen. Oh, God, come on, David. Help me out. Karen. You had her on the show. I was on with you. I forgot her name, but anyway, the premise of it, she discovered, especially in childcare and custody and many other things, that men really have a very bad time. It changed the whole premise of the movie. Then, of course, it got her banned everywhere, haunted by journalists and kicked around in Australia. Anyway, it's called The Red Pill. Highly recommend anyone check that out.
Well, if it was banned, that's when you know you have to see it, right?
I've got two follow-up questions for Chandler. First is Chandler Remington your real name?
Chandler
you do not have to answer that.
Chandler is my real first name. Remington is not.
Okay, I was gonna say it's the baddest ass name on the planet.
It is.
Thank you.
It is.
Now
we just keep saying she's like the smoky female detective with the fedora and the overcoat, sitting in a smoky, darkened private detective's office somewhere in the 1930s, going, "I'm Chandler Remington."
How about the show Remington Steele? Any influence there?
I have heard of Remington Steele, and Remington was my
So
cat's
young.
name, and so Remington was my
I've
cat's
heard of
name.
this
It's in
thing
honor of
called
my
The
cat.
Simpsons.
Okay, well, look, there's a reason
people
why I
tend to
said
really
that.
like the name.
Okay,
The
now,
reason
hold
why
on.
I said it is the premise of the show was she needed to have a male figure for her female-run private investigation firm, so she came up with the fake name of Remington Steele and then hired an actor to play it. So that's why I asked. It could be a kind of influence, but go ahead, David.
Yeah. Second follow-up question. I've heard the statistic about domestic abuse, being equal of men to women. Is it a situation of like all dogs bite? And I'm not saying this to be funny. Like dogs bite, but when a pit bull bites, it makes the news, whereas when a chihuahua bites, it doesn't. And so female on male spousal abuse is a slap or a shove, but male on female spousal abuse is worse. Therefore, makes statistics more.
No, not necessarily at all. The figures that are represented show that women are actually slightly more violent in relationships than men are. But the problem is that we have this thing called the Duluth Model that came out in 1986. It was created by this feminist named Ellen Pence. And it was like this small group of people who weren't even therapists, and they came to this conclusion that essentially all domestic violence, all women are victims, all men are perpetrators. Men want to perpetuate violence against against women because they have the patriarchy in them and they are born oppressors. And there's this intervention model that they have that completely fails to prevent any domestic violence. It's this treatment program that pretty much, shows men that like they're bad, they're the problem. It doesn't really get to the heart of why people are abusive, and abuse comes from, personality challenges, attachment issues, things about like anxious attachment kind of partnerships, like we saw in the, in the Depp Heard thing. It's just really not about gender. But the problem is that you have this model that it's this agency model where you have the court system using it, you have police using it, and they're teaching all of these police, like when you go, if a woman makes an allegation, she's probably in harm's way. A lot of the time women will weaponize the police against their partners. They're the aggressor. They're the ones who are, hitting first. A man hits back, he's screwed. He's totally screwed. He can't say he was acting in self-defense. But it's this concept that women are frail and that the patriarchy is to blame. That's the problem. And we need to start dismantling that, because the statistics show that when you ask about that, like, is it equal? Is it just that like we're hearing about it differently? The problem is that I think it's the statistic that with domestic violence, that more women are killed in domestic violence situations than men are, but men tend to commit suicide more often as a result of domestic violence. Yeah. And you don't really see those statistics as being attached as those relationships, those women causing that problem.
Interesting.
So I hope that answers your question.
That was just woman-splaining. I rejected all that. Was woman-splaining.
Yeah. The statistical modeling and categorical assumptions with regard to domestic violence is one of the most dangerous things you can do. It's every case is so unique, and every interpersonal relationship is so unique. The fact that we try to take this global approach and apply it downward, whether it doesn't matter which gender you're applying it to, the fact that you do that with something that's so dynamic as far as interpersonal relationships is really just, it's a fundamental flaw in how we've treated this area of law.
Actually, and Jeff and I had talked about this earlier about the Prairie Fire Manifesto, which was a Marxist attack on American society, taking Marxism and taking the proletariat bourgeoisie dynamic and turning it into oppressor model and applying that into race and sex as a way to destroy this country. And so that has been implemented. And so what you're seeing is the Marxists are attempting to destroy the country by dividing us by sex and race, and using that as the attack to undermine the society. So that is a very Marxist kind of approach, but taken into a modern duality of oppressed oppressor, which we're all oppressed and oppressors in some schema within the intersectional pyramid.
But some people are both as well.
Some people are, but we're all both. We're all both. So we're all vulnerable. But that's the model that you're talking about, Chandler. It's from a top-down view, it's really kind of a Marxist division.
Absolutely. And the problem with that is that you have what's being taught, like, okay, so I went to UCLA. I was definitely brainwashed in a liberal fashion. I was basically taught all of these Marxist ideologies, and really, they really hammered home the whole Marxism thing. I mean, I was an anthropology major, but, that still came in. And essentially, you're put in this position where you're being taught that, there are these categories of people that are systemically oppressed. And there is systemic oppression, certainly. But the problem is that there's also systemic weaponization of being in a victim category, where a woman can use her femininity to make herself look like a victim when she is the aggressor. And that is the problem with the Duluth model. It's the problem, with positioning this whole thing as in, these kinds of people are oppressed and these kinds of people are the oppressors just based on their sex or their gender. I don't really believe it works like that. It's far too complex and nuanced. But people do sort of weaponize that, take advantage of that. And it creates a systemic problem where there actually is female privilege that we don't talk about. And there's female toxic, like when you talk about like toxic masculinity, there's toxic femininity that we don't talk about. In
a criminal context, when I do criminal defense, and there's a huge female privilege in criminal sentencing.
Yes, a huge disparity between women get lesser sentences for crimes that men commit. Correct?
Right, but maybe that's fair, maybe it's not. But to say that there is privilege only runs one way is false. I mean, there's privileges of each. I mean, we're different. Men and women are different, but it's like we can't even acknowledge that because it's not politically correct. And the differences, but then there's also used to destroy the society by dividing men from women. Everybody has a mother. People have sisters and daughters. We should bring people together. Women and men complement each other. But this division is, very toxic for our society.